If you've seen Spider-Man Brand New Day, then you've probably noticed something pretty important. For the first time in the MCU, it finally feels like we got Spider-Man. Not Spider-Boy, not Iron Man's intern, not a kid trying to figure out how to be the next Iron Man. And honestly, as someone who has spent years reading Spider-Man comics, watching every Spider-Man movie, and consuming just about every version of the character across games, animation, live action, I walked out of this movie feeling like Marvel finally understood what makes Peter Parker special. So let's talk about it. Now don't worry, this review is going to stay mostly spoiler free. The biggest thing Brand New Day does get right is the core theme of Spider-Man, the duality, the battle between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. The person inside the mask has wants, needs, dreams, relationships, and a life of his own. But the mask is the person everyone else needs. The movie constantly asks questions that have defined Spider-Man for decades. Which life requires the greater sacrifice? What happens when you sacrifice too much? How do you find balance between responsibility and happiness? And ultimately, the answer comes back to who Peter Parker is. Spider-Man is special, but Peter Parker is what makes Spider-Man special. In a world where we now have multiple Spider-Man from multiple universes across movies, games, animation, comics, this film reminds audiences why exactly Peter Parker remains the definitive Spider-Man. Another thing I absolutely loved is that this is finally the MCU Spider-Man that feels like your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. The previous Tom Holland films were essentially a journey toward becoming Spider-Man. Even though he had the suit, he was still learning. He needed guidance. He relied on mentors. He looked to older heroes for answers. There was even a running joke throughout the trilogy that he was more Spider-Boy than man. Not anymore. This movie puts him out on his own, and he rises to the occasion. This is Spider-Man, the man. And part of that growth comes from finally seeing Peter Parker's intelligence take center stage. No Stark Tech, no billion-dollar gadget solving his problems, just Peter. The genius that's been a cornerstone of the comics for decades is finally on full display, and it was incredibly satisfying to watch. The pacing is also excellent. There's plenty of action, but the movie understands something that a lot of modern blockbusters forget. Action only works when you care about what's happening between the punches. Brand New Day gives its story room to breathe without ever feeling slow. The quieter character moments naturally flow like into the action, and the action naturally pushes the story forward. The result is a movie that never feels like it's dragging. And speaking of action, this might be the best action we've seen from MCU Spider-Man. You can tell the filmmakers took inspiration from the Spider-Man video games. Spider-Man moves like a seasoned veteran. He's more confident, more fluid, more creative. The swinging is beautiful. The combat choreography is fantastic. And with Jackie Chan's stunt team involved, that shouldn't surprise anybody. There are moments that genuinely look like they were ripped straight from the comic panels or animated series episodes or video games. The visual effects also deserve credit. Previous MCU Spider-Man films often felt overly dependent on CGI. This time around, everything feels more grounded and practical. Even when CGI is being used, it blends far more naturally into the world. The new suit looks like something that could actually exist. And honestly, Tom Holland deserves a ton of praise here. Of the 3 live-action Spider-Man, this is probably the most physically impressive Peter Parker we've seen. Tobey Maguire's suit used padding to create that exaggerated comic book physique. Andrew Garfield leaned into the slimmer Ultimate Spider-Man look, but Brand New Day puts Tom Holland in full cloth suit with no obvious enhancements. And the guy is absolutely shredded. Now let's talk comedy. Because thankfully, Marvel remembered that funny doesn't have to mean obnoxious. The jokes, they feel natural. The humor comes from the characters rather than stopping scenes dead in their tracks. And that brings me to one of the highlights of the entire movie. Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Jon Bernthal's Punisher. Every scene they're together in is pure entertainment. They have this perfect good cop, bad cop dynamic. One is hopeful and optimistic. The other is, well, Frank Castle. It's like watching two best friends with completely opposite personalities trying to solve the same problem, and their chemistry completely steals every scene they're in. Now, I do have some criticisms about the movie. A few of the villains in the trailers are basically glorified cameos. You see them, which is cool, but some deserve more screen time than they got, honestly. Scorpion being one of the biggest examples. Comic readers know Scorpion can be a legitimate threat to Spider-Man. Here, he mostly exists to move the larger plot forward, honestly. And while the main villain is unique and interesting in ways we haven't seen in previous MCU films, they never quite felt like the looming, terrifying threat I wanted them to be. Dangerous? Yes. Memorable? Absolutely. But not quite as intimidating as I hoped. I was also disappointed by the post-credit scene. Honestly, it could have just been part of the movie. I would have preferred something that pushed the larger MCU narrative forward, a funny bonus scene, or no post-credit scene at all. And finally, Sadie Sink's character, the one that's shrouded in all this mystery. Without getting into spoilers, I genuinely don't understand why Marvel treated her role like some massive state secret. Her identity could have been revealed in the trailers, and I don't think it would have lessened the impact of her role on the film whatsoever. But despite those criticisms, they're relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. At the end of the day, director Destin Daniel Cretton delivered something I wasn't sure Marvel could still deliver. A Spider-Man movie that feels like a Spider-Man comic. Not a Spider-Man movie featuring Avengers. Not a Spider-Man movie built around cameos. Not a Spider-Man movie trying to set up 15 future projects. Just a great Spider-Man story. I mean, that doesn't mean that none of that stuff is in there. There are times where, there's obviously MCU influence, but they don't take center stage like they had in the past. For me, that's exactly what this character needed, honestly. So if you're a longtime Spider-Man fan, a comic reader, or somebody who has been wanting or waiting for the MCU version of Peter Parker to finally grow into the superhero he's supposed to be, I think you're going to have a great time with Brand New Day. This doesn't discredit the previous Spider-Man movies in MCU, because they did a great job of leading up to this point, of building on the Spider-Boy becoming the man. So with that said, I give Spider-Man Brand New Day a great recommendation. I would recommend that you see it in theaters. I would love to know what you thought. Did Marvel finally give us the Spider-Man we've been waiting for? Or do you think the previous Tom Holland movies did it better? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, subscribe, and swing back for more.